I'm going to go live here.
Good evening. We welcome you to the Westlake City Schools Board of Education special meeting for Monday, August 9th, 2021. Mr. Hopkins, roll call.
Stoll,
Here.
Kraft here, Fanukin here, Lizinski
Here.
here not.
Here.
We stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next up is approval of the agenda. I need a motion and a second.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Hopkins, roll call.
Lizinski,
Yes.
Fanukin,
Yes.
Kraft,
Yes.
here not.
Yes.
Stoll,
Yes.
motion carries.
Item 2 is informative reports. We have the superintendent's report. Dr. Goggin.
Absolutely, thank you. We did shuffle the agenda around a little bit. We have folks who are watching and folks who are here to hear about the startup plan as well as some components within it. So what I'll do is I'll start with the startup plan and then I'll go back through, I think, 4 of the pages that are probably the biggest topics that we have. And then I'll be a little bit more specific in there. So I work to just share this and see if this works. It didn't work quite right before. Saying, okay, I could deal with that as long as I could. Okay. All right, so I want to go through the entire back to school plan, and like I said, I'm not going to fly through for the slides in there. I will come back to them and talk about them specifically, but I would like to go through all of this and try and do this where I'm trying to find the right size. So I want to have 2 things open for myself. Okay. So as we are coming into the 21-22 school year, we had a lot of parts. We ran a very different school year last year. And some things that we would have taken for granted going from year to year, we had to reinforce because the year was so different that we wanted to make sure that everybody knew even the little things such as the school day. So the good news for this year is we're not having conversations about if we open, we're having conversations about how we open. We are looking at having our K-12 students in school 5 days per week. Our preschool students will be in 4 days a week. For those of you who haven't been a part of our preschool, that's our standard format. Our preschool has run 4 days a week. It hasn't been a 5-day-a-week program, so it's going to run just as it has in the past. When we wanted to create some bullets or highlights to some questions that we know we would have had going into this year, just going through these, the school day will return to our traditional day. We are going to get in a little bit more detail in a little bit on what that traditional day is. Masks are strongly recommended for students in grades 7 through 12. Masks being required in PK through 6 with the ability for a parent to opt out. Desk shields are still available upon request. We have those still. Sanitizing stations are still available throughout the building. Traditional lunches will return. Recess, extracurriculars, and athletics are fully open. We're in our fall season with competition starting shortly. And then the last one, the option for in-person or virtual participation will be available for selected meetings throughout the year. So that last one, I just want to explain because I've had some questions on that one too, is one of the things that we found last year could be like open houses or conferences is a good one, where we found that some of the meetings that we held could be an IP meeting, could be a conference. It was very beneficial for Zoom at times for someone who could be working. They can meet with a teacher on a break or when they're done with their round. So we want to be able to make sure we take some of the things that were positive out of last year and be able to maintain them to make it, to really increase the communication and participation with our families. So when we explain the masking protocol a little bit more, where we get in this, where we did take the two primary goals and wrote them on our board and had conversations about it, where we do want to have an environment that we either prevent or limit the spread that we have in our schools. And we keep the students in person 5 days a week. Now, one of the things I want to say about that is I'm very proud of the work that our staff, our students, and our parents did last year, but I don't want to do it again. You know, it was one where I think they did a lot of planning, a lot of efforts, and I think a lot of work went into being able to educate kids last year, but that's not something we want to be in school. We're best when we're in school 5 days a week with our students. So breaking it down, when we look at it and talk about it, as I mentioned before, requiring for students in grades PK and 6 with having that opt-out for parents, and then strongly recommending them in grades 7 through 12. This is one of the slides that I'm going to get into and I'm going to come back to because I know it's a big one that we have. The other part is the quarantine protocol. So one of the things that, well, the quarantine protocol, what we want to do is utilize the quarantine protocol that the Ohio Department of Health has sent out. And that they just sent out an updated one last Thursday, which we did link to this document. And the quarantine protocol is something that when we approve this, we are going to have the board approve the enforcement of it. This is one of the 2 items that were mandated last year that are recommended this year. So when somebody gets a letter, the letter will say, we recommend that you quarantine. And so as a district, we need to emphasize that we are going to enforce through the quarantine. And I'll go through the differences in a couple of minutes on those. So this is another one. So some people may follow everything very closely, and I may be very redundant when I say this, but a lot of the mandates and requirements and some of the things that benefited us, that allowed us to act outside of how we typically act as a school district, expired. And if you remember at the end of last year, you did have even the mask requirement expire. And we did keep it on through the end of the year, but it was also a strange time when it expired, like at a time where most schools still had a few weeks left. But we had that. Well, another thing that was not renewed for us is our ability to act as a virtual school. And so when we were able to run separate virtual classrooms, and with the legislation expiring, we would then have to create a new school. And so just so you know, little background in schools is every one of my buildings needs what's called an IRN. So it's an associated IRN number, and every building has one of those. And so we would have had to create a new IRN, provide all the devices, which really isn't a big deal for us because of the one-to-one that we're going, and provide internet connection in people's homes as well. And in addition to other components with that, bottom line is they took away a lot of our flexibility when it came to virtual instruction. I'm not going to go through specifically the questions. I can do that when I go through the 4 slides I'm going to hit on more deeply. So building start and end times, this is one of those things we needed to remind people of. Last year, we spent the entire year on a different schedule. So we're going to have fifth graders coming from fourth grade who've never been, or actually fifth graders going to sixth grade, who haven't run a traditional disc schedule or LBMS schedule or anything like that. So we wanted to make sure we put in here this reminder about what our regular day looks like. And so that's why this slide is in there, to make sure that people are not working off of our previous schedule and our current and working on to our current schedule. School lunches, recess, and extracurriculars. We will be bringing back the school lunches. Recesses will continue at WES and DIS. So when we ran lunches in the elementary school last year. We ran recess in the elementary school last year, but in DIS, LBMS, and the high school, we did not run lunches. Transportation. So we're going back to how we transported before. The one carryover, and I'll get into this when I talk about it, but it's okay if I say it twice. Although items from last year that were mandated were now recommendations, one item that is in place is the CDC does have an order for masking on public transportation, and school buses are considered public transportation. So there is an order out there, and we will be masking on buses. So the other thing we have is our Demon one-to-one tech program. This one took a lot of, we put a lot of thought into this one for a couple different reasons. One was finding that balance between saving what we learned from last year, because we had an immersion in technology professional development training for our teachers and our students and our families. And there's a lot of things that we can continue to utilize to be more efficient in delivering our education. However, we know that people just spent a long time looking at computer screens, and they're probably thinking to themselves, the last thing I want right now is another computer screen type of thing. So we're finding that balance to where we think it's the right time, because the aptitude is there, but we have to be very careful in how we actually implement it, so that we're not just bringing kids in and putting them back on a computer screen, because part of what we want to do is to be able to reintegrate our students back into our schools. So we are going to move forward with it, but we're very conscious of the fact that, you know, there is a bit of digital fatigue that is out there. We do have information sessions that are scheduled for those students who studied remotely for the entire school year. 2 of them for Westlake Elementary School, and then 1 for DIS, 1 for LBMS, and 1 for WHS. We recognize that there are, I mentioned it a moment ago, there are students who have never been into the building that their school. You know, if they were completely virtual, there's a good chance that they may have never been in there. And so to assume that a 6th grader is going to walk into DIS and know the lay of the land, typically how a 6th grader does in DIS, it was an altered schedule, it was a different platform. So we do have some information sessions for students who are returning. Some of them, if they're going from 4th to 5th grade, never to locker and never had to do that. So we do have some catch up to happen inside there. And then finally, building open houses. The dates, we wanted to make sure that the dates were listed out for folks. So start there. Any questions that I can answer before I dig into 4 hot topic slides? Okay. So to kind of go back through and masking and quarantine. So I have my notes here, so I'm going to leave that slide up, and I'm going to be able to look at mine too. All right, so when we started last year, in last summer, as we were planning for the 2020-2021 school year, there was a statewide mask mandate in place, and the quarantine protocols were mandated also by the state as well. What's interesting, a parallel that we had from last year to this year, so last year, the big primary topic was instructional model. There was a lot of passion around the instructional model that we came into. You know, do we go virtual, do we go hybrid, do we go all in? And you know, it was like the two mandates were there. So it was like, okay, we're not worried about those. We're worried about how we're going to come back to school. Some people were very, very passionate. No virtual. I mean, we had protests. You know, we had a lot of folks that were very passionate about instructional model. This year, it's going to be about masks. That's going to be the primary topic that we hear. So it's something that we're experiencing each year. Very passionate opinions about all of this. So what guided us last year? So when we looked at it last year, the Board of Education in our July meeting, we did you passed a policy committing to follow all federal, state, and local mandates and orders. So that was something that the board had committed to. Whatever order or mandate that is coming from the federal, local, or state level, that we would do, which is again the reason why CDC order with buses, we're definitely honoring that. The other thing, so we also, another parallel from last year was looking at all the guidance that was coming out, and you have multiple health organizations that will release information, whether they're connected to any level of government or their associations through there as well. One of the things we ended up doing when we looked at the way that we were going to open, whether, you know, when we looked at what virtual looked like, what hybrid would look like, and then all in would look like, was the quarantine protocols. So if you recall, at the beginning of last year, probably around this time when we were sitting here going through this, the protocols indicated 6 foot distance for a span of 10 minutes. And so if you were within 6 feet of somebody and it was for 10 minutes, you were considered a close contact. Then as the year went on and people learned more, I would assume, then, and by the way, this is from Ohio Department of Health, is what we're referring to. They came out with guidance for us and said, it's now, it's going to stay 6 feet of distancing, but now it's 15 minutes. So they kept the 6 feet, but they went from 10 minutes to 15 minutes. And then around January, February, they switched the guidance that said, you know, we're going from 6 foot distance to 3 foot different distance if both are masked. And so it evolved as we went through the year. And we absolutely look at all of the guidance that comes out. And just on a side note, when it comes to the what we received from the Ohio Department of Health, whether it was the weekly type of updates that the governor would do, our weekly meetings with Cuyahoga Board of Health, all those organizations were very, very helpful, and we got a great respect for what they have to do, and I think they even gained respect with what we had to do. So one of the things that we had talked about was the concept of recommendations. And while I said before, we would look at the recommendations that would be coming from the Board of Health, Cuyahoga Board of Health. And for example, the Cuyahoga Board of Health last year came out with the recommendation that we were virtual for a long time. I think, I can't remember the exact date. It was almost, I almost think it was closer to March as the governor came out and said we wanted to be out by March 1st. So the recommendation that we kept getting was to be in virtual. Well, we respected that and said, we understand, you know, where that's coming from. But when we looked at it from as a district, the high school stayed in a virtual model for 4 weeks. Now, these don't add up to 36. We usually do a 36-week school year. We counted like the day coming back from right before Thanksgiving, that counts as a week. So when you do the math, you're going like, that's 37. So we had 4 weeks in virtual, 17 weeks in hybrid, 16 weeks all in. The high school, if you recall, went back in 2 weeks before grades 1 through 8. And then 1 through 8, we went virtual for 4 weeks, hybrid for 19 weeks, and all in for 14 weeks. Now, one of the things when we talked about, when we would talk to the Board of Health about going back, well, they're saying we should be virtual, but now we're going to go into a hybrid model. And one of the things that would be pointed to us, a primary thing that was even a part of our planning when we originally created the hybrid, was in our plan, the students wouldn't be close contacts in class. So where you had the 6 foot distancing. So we're like, we're in the hybrid, you're saying that a person is a close contact or needs to go into quarantine if they are less than 6 feet away from each other. And so we followed the guidelines to it. And some of the responses we get is, well, then you're fine. It's like, well, but your recommendation out on the website is saying to be virtual. And it's like, well, but they make the recommendations to be applied. They said, we don't know the conditions in all the schools or anything like that. So they have the general recommendations there. So the only reason I bring that up is, as we go through the recommendations, there's no question we read them and acknowledge them and go through them. But we have been falling back on when we would look at that, what does it take to quarantine a student? And we've seen that evolution. We've seen the evolution go from 6 feet for 10 minutes, then 6 feet to 15 minutes, then 3 feet with both students masked. And now they're saying, 3 feet, and the student who is masked doesn't have to quarantine. The one who's unmasked would. And I'm talking about the primary level, which is unmasked, but not addressing vaccinations in that. So we applied this last year, and we used that metric where we said, all right, we definitely want to keep students out of quarantine. And so if we did that, we would effectively reduce or prevent the spread within our schools. So as we went through the school year last year, we had 724 students who were placed in quarantine. Now your first thought is, well, that didn't work very well because you were 6 feet. But the majority of our quarantines that we experienced didn't happen in the classroom. The majority were people who were being quarantined from home or for outside type of things. You can have a football situation, a basketball situation that'll knock out, 10 to 15 to 25 kids right away. So and the other thing, the other reason why I want to bring this up, and I want to see if I could scroll on this, is one of the reasons why we feel very strongly about enforcing the quarantine protocol is there are sometimes we can't control if a student contracts COVID or anybody contracts COVID outside of our school. If somebody goes to a party, somebody has a family event, Thanksgiving or something like that. But one of the things that we can't control is the spread in our school. And so if we did not have the ability to quarantine when someone is a close contact, that would be very difficult for us to be able to do that. Because even if we have masks in the classrooms, we have students who are outside when they're bringing, we still need to be able to quarantine people when we know that they're within that space of a positive case. So what about spread inside the school? We had 5 transmission incidents last year that were associated with the school. All 5 of the students who had contracted COVID within the school district were in extracurricular activities. So we didn't have any reported from the classroom. We had 108 staff members placed in quarantine. 2 were positive from in-school interactions, and they were not classroom interactions. They were social interactions outside of the classroom. So that was last year. And so we finished last year. The mandates ended at the end of the school year. The only mandate or order that is in place is the order for bus riders. We entered into our summer season, and I have a chart that I could pull it up and show you, is that when you saw as we got to the end of the year, cases were down incredibly, down to very little. So as we entered the summer, we didn't even strongly recommend. We came out and said mask or fully option for the summer. I'll be honest, that's what we indicated. So we ran our extended learning plan in Camp Link, where we've had over 1,000 students circulating onto our campuses in our summer programming. We've had 2 student cases and no transmission reported through that. Grades 7 through 12, we've been running all of our fall sports. They're in progress now. We've had cases, but we have no reported transmission. That includes multiple indoor teams through our volleyball program as well. So that leads us to guidance that we received this year. And this is the document that I was referring to that came out on Thursday from the Ohio Department of Health. There's a couple things I want to point out. This is different than a lot of the documents. Let me see if I can. Oh, that okay. I'm gonna say that might maybe make it better for all of us. So back to the planning last year, where a big thing that we looked at was close contacts. And you know, as we can look at it and say that, you know, what is now being determined as a close contact. This is different than any of the documents that we received last year, and I'll show you why. Is, you know, one of the ways that we kind of looked at it for our planning is this is telling us, giving us two paths here. So this path up here, and I'll even repoint that arrow there. So can folks here see that, or should I make it? Okay. The very top, it says, well, and this is focused on the classroom setting. Okay, I just want to point that out because people say, what about sports and that sort of thing? This conversation is focusing on the classroom setting. So does the mask have all of the following in place? Masking for students and staff regardless of vaccination status, strategies to maximize physical distancing at least 3 feet, and documented prevention policies, that is obviously our increased air ventilation systems, our tracking of symptoms and close contacts, and our protocols for cleaning, which, you know, I got to tell you, our nurses were fantastic when in tracking everything last year. Our cleaners were tremendous. If you were in our buildings, you saw them walking around with the cleaning bottles. And it's funny, today we had something over at the high school, and we have some new administrators there. And there were desks out in the rotunda, and one of the administrators said, I've never seen a school that actually cleans the bottom of the desk too, to where we take them and we clean, you know, up and down with it. But so we're really proud of what we were doing there. So what they're saying here is if you do these 3 things, individuals can safely remain in normal in-person classroom settings and participate in extracurriculars and sport activities. So you meet those 3 and that's the outcome. So you can say that, you know, you remain inside here. Now in here, the no part is number 2. So this part here indicates if those 3 are not met, then if you have someone who is the contact, so if somebody comes in close contact and the contact is vaccinated, they're saying wear a mask indoors as much as possible, either for 14 days or until they receive a negative viral PCR or antigen test performed 3 to 5 days after exposure. Vaccinated individuals can remain in normal in-person classroom settings and participate in extracurriculars as long as there are no symptoms. And then the other part is, so whether you're vaccinated or masked, they're saying that the person does not have to be quarantined. So the students do not have to be quarantined. So the primary message that's coming out of here in this bottom part is if you are vaccinated or you're wearing a mask, then you really aren't going to be put into quarantines unless there are symptoms that are present. And really, that's the same thing that we had heard last year. The change from last year to this year is 3 feet apart, masked as long as no symptoms are presented. And now they're saying masked if one person's masked 3 feet apart within there. So there's 2 different options on here. You can do the full uniform masking for students and staff and go to the right and saying that, here's the result of that. Or if we do have flexibility in the masking, then here's what would happen. Those who are masked or those who are vaccinated would not be subject to the quarantine protocol, and those who are not vaccinated and not masked would be subject to the quarantine protocol. So that this document, and again, back when we were planning last year, we utilized that and we said the 6 feet, okay, 6 feet for X amount of time, and then 3 feet, and we worked through in that regard. So going through, oops, that stayed there. You know what, I think I have to go back, hold on, sorry. See if that works. Oh, so the next thing to touch on, and let me see, let me get to here. So when we were talking about PK6, obviously masks on bus per CDC order. We talked about the mask mandate with the parent opt-out. So one of the questions that was asked, which is the same question that we sat and discussed as well, what's the difference between just saying it's optional as opposed to allowing parents to opt out? Well, one of the things that we have is number one, it sets our standard to mask. So if there is no form that was sent in, then the expectation of a student is to be masked. Okay, and to be clear, we do want students to come in masked, especially when we're looking at grades K through 4. It also communicates parents' intentions, and we thought about this logistically. For if I'm a 3rd grade teacher and I have 20 students in my class, and let's say 10 are masked and 10 are not masked, how do I know that the unmasked students, the parents want them to be unmasked? I mean, I know that, I will say that as a 3rd grader, I could have been one of those kids that my mom tells me to put the mask on, and I leave with the mask on, and I get to school and I stuff it in my pocket and say, yeah, I wore a mask. And then now put these together when it comes to the protocol, to where if both my mom and dad worked, and so if my mom sent me to school and I didn't wear my mask and I was supposed to wear my mask, and now I'm a close contact and I'm quarantined for at least 7 days, and now my mom has to take work off because I'm at home, she's going to be very upset about that. So we also wanted to make sure that intentions are clear. So if parents are sending their child to school, then and they expect them to be wearing their mask, we need to know. And so we would need to know that that's the case, so that we do that as best as we possibly can. Kids can like do something and that, but we would manage those. And it respects parents' choice based upon their individual circumstances for their child. And to where, yes, we obviously want to have every student masked or vaccinated, or in some way have that layer of protection between them and COVID. And that's really a big message that we received. And even you saw it in the ODH guidance, is to have that layer between you and the virus. Now, obviously multiple layers. If you're distance masked, you have a shield, you have a vaccination, you're less likely to have it. But to at least have a layer between the student and the virus. So, but there are going to be parents who have concerns about whether it's social-emotional wellness or other type of respiratory issues or different type of things like that, where they're concerned just in general about their student wearing a mask. When we looked at 7 through 12, so masks on the bus for, well, obviously 7, 8, because 9, 12, we're not busing unless it's for a sporting event, but masks on the bus for the CDC order, strongly recommending the mask. And the delineation between the two, a lot of it is based on the access to the vaccine for those who are 12 years and up. Quarantine, follow the recommended quarantine protocols, and then maintaining distancing, cleaning, and options for desk shields as well. A couple other items that I want to point out that are generally brought up and different things we had to consider. There is a House bill that was passed and signed into law, House Bill 244, I believe it is, where there are different things that regulations that were placed on school districts saying, you can't have a delineation between a student who has the vaccination and doesn't have the vaccination. Now, the linchpin with that is the fact that right now the vaccinations are approved by the FDA, but only for emergency use. Now, when the FDA gives full approval to the vaccinations, then the 244 is no longer, it hinges on the fact that it's experimental. It's not an experiment, it's emergency use. So it hinges upon that. So we do anticipate from every health organization we've been in conversations with, they do anticipate by mid-September or in September to see full approval for those. So we actually wrote a lot of these with the thought that some of this would be lifted, some of the 244 wouldn't be in place at that time. So if it is in place, if there's new legislation, then we would obviously make changes, which is why in a lot of these, and even this one on the bottom, where we say that changes may occur due to viral spread, revised guidance or legislation. So if those things change and we do have to do this differently, then we will do it differently as well. Other items that I wanted to get on. Looking over, I remember, am I missing anything we talked about? No. So what I'll say is I will see, let me just look at my notes. And what I do is if the board has questions later, I can maybe refer to some of my additional notes if I wasn't clear on anything. So what I'll do now, what I would recommend to the board is when we look at the agenda for today, you have my report, you have the hearing of the public, and then you're able to have discussion about this in my recommendation letter E. What I would recommend is that we hear the public comment. And when we get to letter E, and I'll tell you one of the reasons for this. For those of you who don't attend board meetings, if you have seen our board meetings before, we are a board that has our discussions publicly. Sometimes it doesn't look great, but we have our discussions publicly. And so what I would say is that you hear from the public, you have your discussions when we do a motion for letter E, but then I would table a vote so you can take what folks are telling you here in discussions that you had. So it's not like you're making a 10, 15 minute decision within that period of time. We have enough time, like I put in here, things change quite a bit at times. So we have time before the school year starts. So I have no issue with doing that if that's something that you would choose to do. But from there, I will turn it back over to you, Dr. Stoll.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next up is hearing of the public. Just a few comments. The public may address the board during these periods designated for public participation, which is now. Each person addressing the board shall give his or her name and address. If several people wish to speak, each person is allotted 3 minutes. As you can see, there's a lot of people here, so we're going to be really strict on that. So it's 3 minutes, so everyone gets a chance to speak. During that period, no person may speak twice until all who desire to speak have had an opportunity to do so. The period of public participation at 15 minutes may be extended by a majority of the board present and voting. Just a few other comments. In general, public participation is permitted at the discretion of the presiding officer. Each participant, again, shall be limited to 3 minutes. This is a special meeting, not a regular meeting. No person may address or question the board members individually. And also, we prevent any public comments that are frivolous, repetitive, or harassing. Okay. So with that, I will open it up to the first person. Again, state your name and address. Are they going up to the podium there? Yep. So who wants to be first?
Hi, my name is Carolyn Kane. I live at 24049 Stonehenge Drive here in Westlake. And the presentation that I just saw spent a lot of time and energy trying to allow some of the kids to go unmasked. Now, I have read the guidance from the Cuyahoga Board of Health, and you also spent a lot of time, Superintendent, talking about why not every recommendation is right for Westlake. I disagree with you on universal masking of students. The reason being that the situation in Westlake is not different from the rest of the country, from the rest of Ohio, and from the rest of Cuyahoga County. The spread of the virus is here. The Delta variant is here. Every health organization is recommending universal masking in schools due to children under 12 not being even eligible for vaccination. Now, we talk about grades 7 through 12. How many siblings are in grades 7 through 12? How many families would like to limit the spread to their younger children who are not even eligible for vaccination? Now, when I talk about, you mentioned families who have concerns. I believe that the Cuyahoga Board of Health actually spells it out very well. They say exceptions should be made for those who cannot wear a mask because of developmental delay or disability, and for those who have severe asthma or other breathing problems. Because of that, I think instead of a parent opt-out form, which just is like a, hey, I think it's great my kid doesn't wear a mask type of form, it should be an application. You should have to have a reason for your kid to go without a mask. If it's approved, great. That way, we can keep the amount of kids, that statistic of unmasked kids, at the lowest amount possible. So I would recommend following the Cuyahoga Board of Health recommendations in most of these. The other thing that is for quarantine, you spent a lot of time discussing why we follow the no path, where the yes path is just a lot easier and quicker. So universal masking means that we have already done the masking, the distancing. I'd also like to say that the distancing at lunch is something I'd like to revisit. We're getting rid of all of that. That means any of the kids who feel very comfortable wearing a mask all day long have now taken it off to eat, which is very important. And they're in a group where many of the kids are not following the same types of concerns that they have. So I would like to revisit distancing at lunch and universal masking due to all of these concerns. Thank you so much.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Lola Wenham. I live in Westlake, Ohio, on Westlake Drive. I want to write notes. I was so emotional about the email that came home on Friday. So I apologize. I'm a parent of a 3rd and 7th grader here at Westlake City Schools. I've lived in the district since 2008. I believe, as you, it is very important for every student to return to in-person learning with all available safety measures possible. I understand that making many decisions for our public school population of over 3,500 students is difficult. Thank you for listening to me this evening as I express my great disappointment in the district's decision to not require all of our students and staff in the district unless there's a medical opt-out necessity, as Karen reiterated. Because let's be clear, for me, I read opt-out as optional. When I look at the past year, I reread all the emails as I save them. I think that's very important. And all the communicators. I got my staff. I believe at the time that the district was making logical decision-making from trustworthy and credible resources. As Dr. Godwin mentioned, the CDC, the Ohio Department of Health, County County, I won't repeat. As Mr. Solis said, I'm not going to try to repeat. Did every parent or staff member agree with it? No. But it was in the best interest and the health and welfare of all of our students. Every student who was in hybrid or all-in benefited from the mitigating protocols this district enforced from recommendations from all of those agencies. This information of sourcing was repeated in several emails distributed to families as far back as March 2020. Again, I have the emails, I can share them. Now I can tell you, I was a parent who made a choice to be 100% virtual. My choice, love it, believe we should all be back in 100%. Once again, with all available safety measures. Over the course of the last year, the success of mitigating COVID in our district was touted in every communication that was regularly sent home. Keeping masks, dust shield, cleaning, spacing at lunch, walkway directionals, concentrated hours, going along with evolution of the guidance. As the number of the cases came down, trended down, and vaccination rates went up, I thought I could see the light at the end of the tunnel with the June mask mandate lifting. Then I found out that Camp Link was going maskless. That meant my children who were not in school since March 2020 would no longer be able to attend. Why was I told? Smaller group sizes and more outdoor choices. But like COVID and so many other viruses, it mutates. Hello, Delta. It's here, it exists. The world of science is ever learning and changing. Again, as we are in the same position we were in 2020.
Time's up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please.
Hi, Rebecca Jewell, 28985 Fall River Drive. I'm in the 8th grade and I like to address the mask policy put in place. With all of my peers in mind, I think about last year and how the masks were used and how everybody did a great job, and we prevented so many cases that could have happened because we listened to the CDC and Board of Health. Though this year with the Delta variant and COVID still going on, we need to be aware that the Board of Health, the CDC, are both recommending mandated masks throughout the entire school, K through 12 and preschool included. Thank you. Hello, my name is Rena Hatchie. I'm in 8th grade and I live at 1510 Cedar Drive. I think that masks should be mandatory for those who are not vaccinated in grades 7 through 12, because there are also people with younger siblings in those grades and that can still be transmitted. And it can also be used as an incentive for those more to get vaccinated if they don't want to wear a mask. You can say that, like, oh, I'll be vaccinated and they won't have to wear a mask. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Dawn Snyder. I live at 2556 North Glen, and I'm sorry, I didn't prepare anything because I wasn't planning to speak, but I know that there are a lot of families like ours who are opposed to the masks, and I just want somebody to speak up for that side. One of the most valuable things I learned in school was in science class was to separate assumptions versus observations. And I'm seeing those two conflated a lot, and people looking at assumptions and thinking that they're observations. The masks were imposed with the assumption that COVID was spread by droplets, and there was never any scientific support for that. The CDC finally backed up and admitted that it's primarily spread by aerosols. No scientist, no doctor anywhere will tell you that masks stop aerosols. They do not. They go right through. They do absolutely nothing to stop the spread of COVID. One of the other observations, a group of parents in Florida sent their kids brand new masks. They put their kids in masks for one school day, 5 to 8 hours, depending on the age of the student, sent them off to a lab to be tested. None of them tested positive for COVID, but they had all kinds of nasty bacteria on them, things that are way more dangerous to be spread around. There was a Legionella. I believe I might be wrong on this, the fatality rate with Legionnaire's disease is about 30%. You don't want to be giving that to your the teachers who might be older, more immune compromised. There are multiple strains of strep bacteria. There were meningococcal strains. There were just a whole host of nasty things. And if you talk to anybody, the crosswalk, the crossing guards, you talk to people around the school. I've talked to these people. They are horrified that these kids are wearing the same masks over and over and over and over again. Now, if these kids had these strains of bacteria on their masks after, brand new masks after 5 to 8 hours, what kind of nasty stuff are they breathing in every day when they're wearing the same mask for 3 weeks at a time? It's literally a bacterial rag. It is. And that is not good for anybody's immune system. It's not good socially, emotionally. There are so many downsides and nobody talks about the downsides. If you have a consensus, science is not based on consensus. There is never a consensus in science. If you have what appears to be a consensus and anything that contradicts that is suppressed and censored, then it's just propaganda, it's dogma, it's not science. And there are so many scientists and doctors around the world saying, these masks don't stop anything. They're just a comfort blanket and they're causing all kinds of damage. And we shouldn't be enforcing these. If you want to do that to your child, go right ahead. But we need to have the right to opt out of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi there, my name is Diane Metzger. I'm at 29847 Schwartz Road. It's been a tough year and a half. It's probably been an especially special brand of heck to be an administrator or decision maker. Westlake has been so great. Everything has been so thought out. I'm sure you've been in countless meetings and hours of it. I still can't get over the mandatory versus optional semantics. If you let parents easily opt out and have the option, then something is optional. It's not mandatory. In practice, it's an optional masking rule. And if it is, then it compromises the integrity and the accuracy of your entire presentation, of your quarantine flow chart, of all of your protocols, of student safety potentially. And I don't think that's the Westlake level of thoughtfulness that we've seen demonstrated so far. So both of my kids go to Westlake Elementary. So I don't know the exact number of students there. I think it's about 1,000, maybe 1,200, but they're going to be there 7 hours a day, 5 days a week. That's 35 hours a week of 1,000 kids in one building, some of them masked, some of them unmasked. And honestly, kids are kind of gross. And even if they're sitting in seats and you have measured 3 feet from head to head, they're going to be in the lunchroom. They're going to be in the hallways. It's going to be disgusting in there. It's going to be a petri dish. And I think that even though nobody likes masks, kids wore them all last year at school. Adults are increasingly wearing them as we go back to work or as we continue to work. Colleges and universities are every day announcing more and more places that are requiring masks for adults, some of whom are vaccinated. And we have 1,000 kids in one building. None of them are vaccinated, none of the kids. Even though we all hate masks, or most of us hate masks, with an increasingly contagious virus and vaccine eligibility expanding a little bit every day, it makes sense to hold on just a little bit longer for our students, for teachers, for staff, by extension for all of us and our community in general.
Thank you. Anyone else?
My name is Katie Craven. I live at 23836 Bonnie Bank Drive. When my mom was an infant, she was hospitalized with what her parents were told was whooping cough. She had 5 older brothers and somebody came home sick and she had it and was hospitalized for months. And it turns out she was later diagnosed as an adult as she really had polio. She had a minor case of polio. So when we talk about what is going on with coronavirus and COVID-19, it's not you get it and you're fine or you die. We have long haulers. And I'm telling you my mom's story because she's a polio long hauler. She had major surgery at 65 to repair damage that was done when she was 3 months old. She had more surgery at 70 to further repair damage that was done when she was 3 months old. Now, I know polio and COVID are not the same thing, but that was the last, I think, big outbreak of anything that impacted children and impacted how we treated children. Having masks as an option at an elementary school where we know those kids are not vaccinated just doesn't make scientific sense. It's not based on any medical recommendation. It's based on somebody's opinion of whether a mask is good for their child or not. It's not based on science. You went over all the great numbers from last year, the low transmission rates, the relatively few cases that were transmitted at schools. It's because we had all of those safety protocols in place. And to me, it just doesn't make sense to remove some of them or have parents remove some of those and put our children at risk. It not only puts our children at risk, it puts the children of staff members. It also puts an undue, I think, requirement on teachers of trying to remember, oh, is Johnny supposed to wear a mask or is Susie supposed to wear her mask? And having that list, it just doesn't make sense. If we mandate it, we know everybody knows what they're supposed to do. Comparing what's happening at Camp Link or in fall sports where they're spending a majority of time outside, I don't think is a fair comparison. When we're in school, it's going to be totally different. We have a long winter here where we know classes will not be outside. I have a 6-year-old. She will not be able to get a vaccine anytime soon. It puts those of us that have young children in a very, very precarious place. I have either put her at risk or I have to find alternative schooling at this very late date. I don't want to do that. I want her to go to school with her friends. I want her to be in 1st grade with her friends. And I don't want her to have some kind of neurological damage 20 years from now or surgery 60 years from now because she got something as a 1st grader. Thank you.
All right, 15-minute limit, so the board could extend it if you so choose.
I have a motion, the board to extend, like to extend.
I'll make that motion.
Second. Roll call, Mr. Crafton.
To extend for how many minutes?
15.
15 minutes. To extend the hearing of the public by 15 minutes. Fanukin?
Yes.
Lizinski?
Yes.
Kraft? Yes. Here not?
Yes.
Stoll?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Next up.
Hello, can you hear me? Because I can be louder. Thank you. My name is Rachel Jewell. I live at 28985 Fall River Drive, Westlake, Ohio, and I am not going to repeat what I have already sent you in an email this morning. Instead, I would just like to make the point that it would, as Ms. Kane said, it would be easier for everybody involved, the teaching staff, the bus staff, everybody, if everybody had to be masked all the time. It's like you said, all of the digits you gave us for last year were based on the fact that we all had on masks, and it worked. I recognize that there are vaccines available, and everybody in my family who's eligible for a vaccine is vaccinated. Alas, I have a 6th grader who's going to be taking 8th grade math next year. He will be sent into the cesspool with the kids who don't have to be masked. One of my questions is about him and his friends who do that, whether they're going over to LBMS or the LBMS kids who are going to the high school. Those kids need to be taken account for. In addition, I think it's important that kids who are in school are going to learn their best. We're all in agreement about that. The best way to keep them in school, like we learned last year, is to have them masked, because that will stop the transmission of COVID, even if you're not spreading it within the school. And these are the questions. I have a couple of additional questions from the email that I sent this morning. One is, how are teachers going to be enforcing the masking policy? Are the kids who are unmasked going to be, the kids who are unmasked going to be distanced, or are they all going to be close together? Like, there's no information about that. That has not been addressed. I also am curious as to why we're adding this additional layer to the teachers' responsibilities, because what I really need the teachers to do is to teach. That's what we are paying them for. And that's why we are paying you to set good curriculum and to follow science. Thank you.
Thank you. Next. No one else?
Sarah Tenorio. I live at 26040 Rustic Lane. I have 2 children and going into 3rd grade and 6th grade. A lot of people said a lot of what I was going to say, and I have emailed you, and I can't wait for your responses. But I would just like to highlight a couple of things. So my children ages, they are ineligible for the vaccine. Their best line of defense against COVID is masking. And it's not like a seatbelt where if they mask, they get the best protection. If it were, I wouldn't be here. But it is up to those around them to mask, to protect my kids from getting a disease which may or may not affect them. So I don't understand how a school district who is supposed to have my kids' best interest in mind cannot mandate, recommend, mandate, whatever word you want to say. The other kids in my kids' classrooms need to be wearing masks to protect my kids. And besides the health, their physical protection, social and emotional, my kids know what's going on in the world. They know the science, they know about COVID. So when they see others, peers who they know are not eligible to be vaccinated around them without masks, they are going to be uncomfortable. They are going to be afraid, and they are not going to be able to learn well because they know what's out there. They know that they are not being protected by their peers. And you have the power to allow my kids to feel safe and protected in school. And you're not using it. And that is very disappointing. I also would like to go real quick to the frequently asked questions about if the parent mask opt-out will be valid throughout the entire year. And well, as in the restart guides, you know what you said, but, and it says that maybe if we do not experience spreads or surges, we may continue to honor the opt-out. And I know I just have a little bit of time. So what you're telling me is you are not going to revisit this unless there is a surge in the classrooms or the schools. That is reactive. That is not proactive. And you need, and I'm begging you, to be proactive for my kids' health and safety.
Next.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Hill. I live at 29517 Lansing Drive in Westlake. I would ask that regardless of your decision, you think about our mask mentality as a district right now, because when we are split half and half, it's going to cause conflict in the classrooms. Conflict teachers shouldn't have to deal with, conflict students shouldn't have to deal with. My daughter was one of the kids who went to Camp Link this summer. We tried to go to Camp Link. I'm working full time. I needed a place to send her. I dropped my daughter off in the morning with a mask on her face. She was repeatedly told by adults throughout the day, honey, you don't have to wear that mask. It's okay. By the end of the day, she took the mask off because at least 3 adults told her she didn't have to wear it. What is a 7-year-old supposed to do at that point? Tell the adult, no, my mommy said I had to? It gets old, it's tiresome. The same adults reminding her to tie their shoe for their safety told her she didn't have to wear a mask, even though I dropped her off in it. We're telling teachers you have to remind them all day long, right? For the upper grades, I'm going to be sending a 7th grader to LBMS who cannot be vaccinated if he's not old enough. He is going to be sitting around his peers. You know there's going to be peer pressure in there not to wear that mask. He cannot be vaccinated. So no matter what my choice is, now he's got that on him. We're asking an 11-year-old to deal with that, right? Even if it was somebody who didn't think their kid needed a mask, we're still creating conflict among our students. Now the counselors have to deal with that. The teachers have to deal with that. We're inviting in something that we don't need to invite in. Thank you.
Thank you. Next. Anyone else?
Johnny Hughes, 23319 South Melrose. So I appreciate what you said earlier about not masking, and I appreciate your views. I'm a frontline healthcare worker, so I have seen this firsthand ever since this started. I do have 3 children, one going to middle school, younger ages, and the challenge that I see is that, as all of us have experienced through this, is at one point in this COVID game, this has become an expression of freedom. It's not an expression of freedom. It's an additional measure for safety. And as some people have mentioned here, giving that option without any type of restrictions in regards to why a parent should feel their child doesn't have to be masked, it's just a recommendation. The reality of it is, the adults have the option to be vaccinated. 12 and above have the option to be vaccinated. Those younger groups, they don't have that option yet. So it's up to us to be that protection for them. When the vaccine comes out for them as well, when full authorization is in place, sure, at that point, parents make their own decision because they feel it's freedoms for their families. But until then, I feel that as a school system, we need to provide that protection for them. It's tough in that I hate this. I wear it 40 to 60 hours a week. I have for the past year plus, what is it, 18 months now? And it's brutal, it's excruciating, but it's also a proven measure to make sure that we are protected. In the state of Ohio, since it started, there's been over 15,000 documented cases of COVID for children. Only 7 deaths in the state of Ohio. It's a very small number. I deal with statistics, but to those 7 families, it's kind of important. And so, it's only a couple more months, until the vaccine's out for those younger kids. Board, please, let's just make that protection available for them. So, thank you.
Thank you. Next. Going once, going twice. That's the end of public comment. Thank you. Okay, next on the agenda, the board committee reports. The first one up is legislative liaison.
Legislature is on summer recess, so
No report.
no report.
Okay, next up is student achievement liaison.
Student achievement, 1/3 of all students are participating in some form of Westlake City Schools summer programming. Students are quite happily engaged. Parents have been very appreciative of the summer program and are confident their students are gaining preparedness for back to school. These programs, of course, are focusing on math, reading, fun group activities, and also engage with welfare during social and emotional sessions. And we say thank you to coordinators, to all of our teachers, Thank you to all the teaching assistants, and thank you to the bus drivers. Without this coordinated effort, Westlake City Schools would not have this program. So again, thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Finance and Audit Committee. Joe and John. Who wants to go?
I do have a couple of things, may I?
Sure.
Thank you. Finance, the Finance Committee had an opportunity to tour the Westlake City Schools properties and inspect capital, and that capital did include the transportation fleet and the maintenance truck fleet. We were led by Director Dave Kosovar and accompanied by Treasurer Todd Hopkins. The properties we visited included the Westlake City Schools Board of Education building, while here in this building, we did walk the roof. We had a discussion which included a possible full roof replacement. We also inspected the auxiliary building on the high school campus. As a board, truly consider putting this building to best use. Our discussion while on the roof included roof replacement, also possible build out, and that build out, the discussion that day anyway, we discussed 2 separate large usable locker rooms, potentially a warehouse style storage facility, which uses the full extent of the elevated ceiling. We also inspected the detention basins on the north side of the high school property. Currently, under extensive work, Mr. Kosovar is ridding those basins of invasive plant species so that the water will continue to drain away as it should. And then Mr. Adam House led us at the transportation garage. Our tour involved an inspection of the mechanic bays for large and small vehicles. We also inspected buses, new and old. We discussed the importance of being on a cycle of purchasing 3 to 4 new buses annually for a fleet that is now 45 in number. We're in good shape on our minivans for transportation and the work truck fleet. The work truck fleet is in need of a replacement by winter, and one additional one is what we discussed. We also had a conversation and discussion about the importance of extended warranties for our vehicles. Any questions with regard to that visit? I know some of you wanted to attend and didn't have an opportunity to do so. Yes.
Joe, when you mentioned the auxiliary building, that's the one at the high school that we referred to as maybe a field house.
Right.
What exactly is that being used?
I know currently it is used as a locker room, although the locker facilities are they're small and not very efficient. There is storage there. I know football coaches from across the district were in the process of laying out equipment and getting ready for the upcoming season. But I think all of us would agree that it's a big building. It's a relatively, it is not such an old building. And a decision was made when the new high school was built just to hold on to that, but we really haven't put it to a very good use.
Science Olympiad as well.
Science Olympiad, thank you. Testing, right.
Do the opposing teams use that as for football games, or do they go into the?
Typically, they go back to the high school.
Okay.
That- And I think one of the conversations we had when we were walking about was being able to put together a vision for that building. And maybe going back to the original vision, which was to truly make it a field house, so that the teams that are playing in sports, whether it's by chance soccer, football, lacrosse, that both teams would be able to come back to that facility, versus going all the way back to the high school, or even if it was just a facility that the visiting team could go to, versus just standing off to the side. So that was, I think, the original vision of it. So I think this board would probably be well served to try and make that either original vision come true, or come to some other decisions as to what would be the best use for that. So it has, as Mr. Kraft said, very good bones. We invested in it originally. We made sure that the building envelope is solid. Mechanical is very good. We did most of our service all around in there. Very, very good solid building. It's almost, we have it, what is the best use for it? perhaps it's been used by a variety of different groups. It's almost, I liken it almost to the basement. You can use your basement for a variety of different things, but maybe you want to designate it for one particular thing. So I think that was a big outcome from that. We're going to be scheduling, a finance meeting next, we're going to be scheduling for the next 3 or 4 weeks with Mr. Hopkins to start talking about not just the field house, but also what are some of the capital improvements items that are coming up in the next couple of years, so that we can start planning for those. And then
I think it'd be a good idea to keep that in mind and either repurpose it or find out what we want to use it for. Do you have any idea cost wise?
we talked about that.
It's something that it's an opportunity to look at it. We would need to determine what we would want to use it for, have that vision for a finalized use, and then we would have pricing on it. We have some ballpark on if we did it as a locker room or if we did it as additional storage or if we split it up in different ways, but we really need to lay out and have a finalized vision to get true numbers so that we could work on a proposed budget.
So give some thought to that. If you have ideas, let's share them, and we'll have a finance meeting soon, and we can discuss that at our board meetings as well.
And this storage is always an issue for athletics, so. Storage is always an issue.
There's huge opportunity for, again, warehouse style storage to the ceiling. So that's something. So even with 2 suitable locker rooms, it's a big building. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up is curriculum committee.
We haven't scheduled anything yet, but we probably, once school in and moving along smoothly, we'll probably have some field trips. Amanda's,
Very good.
yeah, so
Okay, thank you. Last one in this area is community outreach committee.
I need to congratulate Mr. Kraft and Dr. Goggin on a fantastic art show 2 weekends ago at the library and at Westlake Elementary, and the pancake breakfast was really well attended. And Wednesday night is the spirit rally that WDAD is doing. And always is a fun night, and I really encourage everyone to attend. The marching band will be there, the selling spirit wear. I don't know what food trucks are coming, but it's always a good night. I would encourage the rest of the board to attend.
Item 5, treasurer's recommendations. Mr. Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. President. We've talked about bond refinancing for some time. Originally going back to March of 2020, even the board had passed 3 resolutions allowing for us to refinance several of the bond issues. We work with Satsina and Associates, Mike Satsina, who's our municipal advisor. And he had identified now these 4 different bond issues that he believes that we would be able to refinance. I know the wording, the legal wording is called refunding, but essentially it's a refinancing, similar to what you would do with your home mortgage. So we would be potentially here refinancing 4 of the bond issues. And why would we want to do this? As I've stressed in the past, this isn't a way of saying, okay, like in your home, you might refinance your home mortgage, and what does that do? That gets more money into your home budget you can spend on other things. That doesn't work that way for the district. So the district can only collect taxes to pay debt on what our costs are. We can't use that money that was passed for debt relief, for reducing our debt as we take on building projects. We can't use that to pay salaries or use that even for the renovation of our buildings, anything like that. It was originally passed as these were for new construction, okay? That money the bond issues were originally sold when that project happened. When we're looking at these were for the high school project and then the elementary project. But what we can do is we can look at opportunities to reduce that annual cost, which means we can collect less taxes from the community. So our homeowners, our community, our commercial properties would reduce what they would pay on an annual basis. So it might be, you know, a 0.1 mils or 0.2 mils, but our goal is to be as fiscally responsible for the community as possible. And this is one way that we can do it by reducing that overall debt for the long term by refinancing at a lower rate. So before you tonight are 4 separate resolutions that I will ask to be passed, a motion seconded, and then voted on separately by advice of legal counsel. For the purposes of this, he is requesting them as each separate motions compared to often where we combine, you know, our treasurer recommendations into one vote. So the first one we have is some bond issue that was, this is going back to a 2002 bond issue. I believe this is actually for, at the high school, it was for the auditorium. So we still have some outstanding bonds on that. Typically what we do is we take out about 30 to 36 year bonds when we do a bond issue. Similar to your home where you might do a 30-year mortgage. Same idea, we take out those bonds and we pay it back over time. So this is an opportunity to refinance these. When we looked at some of these last year, we had some issues between refinancing as tax exempt or taxable bonds. And again, it doesn't necessarily mean much to us from the school district's point of view. What it does mean is lower rates for the community in the long term. So tax exempt bonds have a benefit to the bond holder. So if you were to buy a bond they're sold in $5,000 increments. So if you were buying a bond of Westlake City Schools and you did a tax exempt bond, you are tax exempt from IRS taxes on any earnings that you make on that bond, on the interest that we're paying over the life of that bond. So what that does is because it's tax exempt, you're not paying through federal taxes. We typically have lower interest rates that we're able to pay because there's a benefit to the holder of the bond being tax exempt. By waiting this past 18 months or so, we have 3 of these 4 issues that I'm asking the board to approve tonight have become what's called callable. We can now call those bonds back after a certain amount of time, and we can reissue them at a tax exempt issue again. So they were tax exempt initially, we can now do it again as a tax exempt issue. So we're able to do that, keep the rates again as low as possible. Right now, we're still continuing to see historic bond rates very, very low. And this would give us the authority to do it. The actual pricing of the bonds would happen late September. You'll see in some of the determinations here, the bonds are coming due at the end of this year in December or so. And we're able to price it in September, and then we do the sale. We have a time window that the IRS allows for us to do the sale and reissue of new bonds while paying off the old bonds as they're callable. So the one issue that's not callable was the actual high school issue that was done in 2014. And the reason that was done is at the time, bonds were issued under some, it was the Recovery Act, Reinvestment and Recovery Act, as we had the housing collapse in 2008 extended through. And there were a number of bonds that were issued, which were called either Build America bonds or QSCUBs, Qualified School Construction Bonds. And in this case, these were originally issued and then refinanced once already in 2014, but they were originally issued as Build America bonds. And part of the Build America bonds, because they were being subsidized by the federal government, is they had to be taxable for the life of the bond. So we would refinance this as a taxable bond. But the other 3 we're able to do as a tax exempt bond. So this would give us the authority to do that. Like I had said, we work with Mike Sansina as our municipal advisor. Mike is a independent, unbiased third party who acts on behalf of the Board of Education in the interest of the Board of Education and the community in the sale of these bonds. And then I'm proposing on these 4 recommendations to work with 2 investment bankers or investment banks, one being RBC, which Kent Cashel and Andrew, Andrew's last name, are bankers who work through RBC. And then we'd also be looking to work with Austin McGuan with Stifel Nicholas. While Stiefel Nicholas is a smaller firm than RBC, the net benefit of Stiefel Nicholas is they have a local office. So, you know, we do have people who invest in bonds in this community, and if people would like to buy the bonds, I'd like to have a retail location to where they could buy the bonds. So we're looking at somewhere between 85-15 split between the two, as RBC has done a number of these issues for us before, a little bit bigger, and has brought has done more of the homework in collecting research on these bonds. But all of that's laid out in very, very long resolutions that were written up by our attorney, which is Rick Maniloff from Squares Patent Bonds. If there's any questions on any of the four of them, I'm happy to go through those right now. If not, I would ask for that motion and second done individually for each set of the bonds.
How will those local offices bring those bonds to the local community?
You know, what we'll do is we'll try to advertise it internally.
Okay.
And possibly advertise it maybe with the city. And then we would ask that local office to contact their local clients to see if they would like to invest in our bonds.
Okay.
Can I have a motion?
And I've used Stiefel Nicholas in the past. They have actually helped with one of our issues for the elementary when we did a split sale. We did the bank qualified and then the non-bank qualified. When we did the bank qualified.
If I remember correctly, wasn't there a social media post about that also? For people were interested.
I believe we did at the time, yes.
Okay.
And we could look to do that again. And they could contact the local system.
I have a motion and second for treasurer's recommendation 5A.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
I know at this time, we probably wouldn't be able to pin you down as to what this could mean in the way of savings going forward, but it'll be interesting once the sale occurs, what the benefits will be long-term for this.
And that's a valid point. I apologize. I didn't explain that. Bond rates change daily, change throughout the day. It's an open market. So what will happen is while we have identified these as potentials for savings, we would not follow through on the sale if things would change to where it would not be in the benefit of the district. There's no point of doing that. We would continue with the bonds as they currently stand. But if we're able to go to that pricing and we're able to do, typically what happens with your investment banks is when they price that out by making some, you know, kind of feeler calls to their clients, anything that doesn't sell, they typically will buy the bulk of those bonds, again, ensuring us to get the sale of the bonds at the rate that we're looking for. So unfortunately, that pricing won't happen until later, but please be assured that we would not move forward if it would not be in the financial best interest of the district.
Very good. Any other discussion? Hopkins, roll call?
Kraft,
Yes.
Fanukin,
Yes.
Kaczynski,
Yes.
here not,
Yes.
Stoll.
Yes.
Motion carries.
And I have a motion and second for treasurer's recommendation 5B.
Don't move.
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Hopkins, roll call?
Kaczynski,
Yes.
Fanukin,
Yes.
Kraft,
Yes.
here not,
Yes.
Stoll.
Yes.
Motion carries.
I have a motion and second to treasurer's recommendation 5C.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none. Roll call?
Fanukin,
Yes.
here not,
Yes.
Kraft,
Yes.
Kaczynski,
Yes.
Stoll.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Motion and second for treasurer's recommendation 5D.
So moved.
Got two motions. Would one of you
I'll
like to
take the
second?
second.
Second, thank you.
Discussion?
Moved by Fanukin, seconded by Kurnat.
Discussion? Hearing none. Roll call?
Fanukin,
Yes.
Kurnat,
Yes.
Kraft,
Yes.
Kaczynski,
Yes.
Stoll.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Next up is item 6, superintendent recommendation. Dr. Goggin?
Sure. I have number 6A, that is for Camp Link classified personnel that are listed through their resolution to approve contracts and purchase services. This is a list of services such as music therapy enrichment center, Art Therapy Studio, Cleveland Clinic Center for Autism, ESC, NEO PEP agreement, New Directions, North Coast Therapy, extra service that, basically extra services that we utilize through the year. Another recommendation is to approve the Westlake, the Early Childhood Parent-Student Handbook. Letter D is a resolution to approve the Aspect Foundation placement of foreign exchange students. In executive content you can read about the foreign exchange student. And then letter E was the back to school plan. What I would recommend is that you bundle A, B, C, D. So 6A through 6D, and leave letter E separate from that, so then we can have a discussion as well.
Very good. Yep. Can I have a motion and second for superintendent's recommendations 6A through 6D?
So moved.
Second.
I have a question on the foreign exchange student. Is this the same student from that we've approved over the summer?
I don't believe so. Is it? I don't believe it is.
So we have two
I think so.
from Italy?
I'll double check. Well, I'll double check that. I didn't think it was the same one.
Kathy said.
Two separate? Yeah.
It's just interesting that we have two from Italy. That's, yeah, that's.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, roll call, Mr. Hopkins?
Lizinski,
Yes.
Kraft,
Yes.
Fanukin,
Yes.
you're not,
Yes,
Stoll,
Yes.
motion carries.
So what I would recommend here is for 6E, you can table it, but then when you do the motions, you can still have a discussion.
Okay. Yep. So 6E, superintendent's recommendation, we're going to table the resolution for now. As everyone knows, things are changing daily, if not by the minute. So what we want to do is take in all of the ideas we heard from the public this evening, have an open discussion as we always do with the board. Think about it, and we'll either do this at the next meeting, whether that's a special meeting or the next board meeting, which I believe is scheduled in 2 weeks. So that's the plan. Can I have a motion second to table the?
That would be yes. So the
Motion
motion would be the motion to table superintendent's recommendation 6E. And if the board would choose to table it, it automatically gets kicked to our next.
So moved.
Discussion. Well, we don't need to discuss the tabling, right? Or do we vote on that?
It's, you can, it's open for your discussion right now.
Okay.
You can-
Yeah.
Very
Want to
good.
use that as an opportunity to talk a little bit?
Okay, you want to kick it off?
I know the idea of, say, mandating masking. There are comments mentioned today that if we mandate, say, all students mask, I know as a board, we can have a conversation about, do we do that for a period of time? One of the thoughtful parents this evening mentioned that we may wait until all students have an opportunity to be vaccinated. And again, these are new ideas to me. I'm just interested to have a conversation with my board about that. If we start the year out mandating masks for all students, how long do we do it for? Is it indefinite? What period of time are we thinking if we do indeed mandate masks for all students to start off the year? Any thoughts on that?
I think one of the things that we might see develop over the next couple of weeks is either mandate, maybe from the US Department of Education, perhaps the state of Ohio. You know, we're getting recommendations from the American Pediatric Association, CDC, and both the state and federal levels of the Department of Ed. So that, you know, as we roll out, if you look today, United Airlines mandated all of their employees to be vaccinated. Target recently has required masks. So things, as I said, are very dynamic. They're changing. If we made a decision tonight, and that's why I think it made a lot of sense to table it, that we may counter that decision tomorrow or the next day or the next week. So I think we've got a couple of weeks before the school year starts. It gives us a lot of opportunity to take in what we all heard tonight, think about it, discuss it, see what rolls out over the next week or two, and make some decisions going forward.
Hey, the thing that I'd like to, because I've had several parents say, and this deals with the high school, and I understand the problem when you have kids in each school. The high school was able to be vaccinated, and some parents have said, I had my child vaccinated so they wouldn't have to wear masks. Now, obviously that, disrupts everything with the different levels, but so how do we deal, and I understand that, and I sympathize with that, and I sympathize with all the people that want the masks mandated. So what do we do? Do we require the high school also? Can we mandate them even though they've been vaccinated? I heard one of the students say, mandate masks unless they've been vaccinated. So do we ask for proof of vaccination to allow them not to wear masks?
It's a good question.
I also like the idea, and I think it was our very first parent, as opposed to opt out, have them apply, fill out an application if there is a medical problem. And I also have a question about the shields. If the kids couldn't wear masks, and I know the shields aren't supposedly as good, but is there a possibility that if they can't wear a mask, could they wear a shield?
I was add on what Mr. Kraft said, that there were some new ideas tonight that myself has not considered. My three kids just graduated from the schools, so they're on to new adventures. But the one thing that I've come to realize in the last week or two, that a lot of the higher education universities are going mandating masks. State, Keats Western, Cleveland State, a number of the universities in Ohio are mandating masks when students return, regardless of their vaccinated. And they are asking for students to give them vaccination information. Because once you are not, we'll have to go into a separate protocol associated with testing. Because the colleges themselves do not want to have a mask on. As do any schools. I think putting a pause on what our decision is going to be for this fall's decision. I think it's also best for us to look at what is out there. We were very, very objective in our decision making. Regardless, last year we put together a plan, whether it be virtual, hybrid, or all in. I've looked at a lot of the other districts around. Biasly, I will say that we did a very good job. Three of those areas. Spread down, keeping the quarantine numbers down, and providing the education that best we could in circumstances. No one wants to go backwards. We definitely made progress from the spring of 20 to where we were at the end of the school year this year. That being said, my hope would be that we would put in as many protocols as we could to keep as many of the students, staff safe for the foreseeable future. The one comment that resonated with me was that maybe it is something that is a mask mandate is kept on until such time that vaccine is available to the kids that are pre-K. That may not be that long from now. Could be a matter of a couple weeks, it could be maybe 4, 5, 6 weeks. But if we were to be a little bit more conservative on the front end, it may help us at the start of the school year be less complicated. The ultimate goal is really to keep the students in school. If we were to go with, I'll call it limited masks, because it's optional to a degree, we run the risk of having a lot more students in quarantine. If in quarantine are not going to be. So the ultimate goal really is keeping kids in school. Best way to keep kids in school is to follow kind of all 3 of the protocols, including masking for pre-K through 12. So I appreciate the feedback today we received, and obviously we all received emails and phone calls. And we're doing our best to make the best decisions we can for our community. And glad we're putting a pause on this, and we'll have more conversations over the next week or so.
So do we, Dr. Goggin mentioned it, but we cannot discuss this on the outside. We have to talk about it in our board meeting. So it's not like we can get together, you know.
And then our next board.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, right.
Well, one of the things I could do is I can even put together ideas and send everything and inform you, but as far as engaging dialogue about it.
So do we like set, okay, so we'll have masks mandated for like the first few weeks of school and then just reassess it from there?
I think that's one option. I think maybe our charge to Dr. Goggin maybe is go back and create maybe different options to present to us at our next meeting. Or actually before our next meeting, so we can prepare to talk about them. And one of them could be full masks pre-K up until, say, vaccine is available to all students. Could be for say 5 weeks, and then reevaluate to see how the spread is, if the quarantine rate is here compared to some of our other districts. Because the other districts around us, at least Avon, like I know, are not doing, or doing optional masks. And I think some of the other districts are the same way. Some are doing a combination of. We may be able to do 5 weeks, see if the masks are really making an impact. They are, obviously, decisions there. That is the one positive thing that Dr. Goggin did. Well, he did many positive things. At least one of them was that he remained very, very objective to everything, following recommendations, looking at our own numbers. So, which is good, because now that we have our own numbers from the past, we would also be able to compare them to what's happening, say, in the first 5 weeks or 6, 7, 8 weeks of this year with masks versus what we did last year. So the good news is we have a lot of information. We just need to make decisions to, do we want to be conservative, risk averse, starting out, or be a little bit more lax? That's part of the discussion.
I do really feel it's important to remember we are going into the 3rd school year that these students are going to be impacted by COVID. And it is so important to have them in person as much as we possibly can, 5 days a week. And I recently heard a quote in discussing COVID and all the changes with Delta variant and whatnot. And the comment was, we live in 2021 and we're working under 2020 assumptions and data. And the reality is, if this was June, we'd be having a really different conversation than what we've got going on right now. And we're seeing school districts have hundreds of kids in quarantine already in the South. And it's a legitimate concern. And if wearing a mask for our students, which the vast majority of them wore without a single problem, last year. It's really not asking that much. And especially while we are considered under significant spread with this new Delta variant and the fact that they are the youngest, half of our students are not eligible for vaccinations yet. I think it's an additional layer of protection. Whether you want to call it the Swiss cheese model or the lasagna model, but it's truly that vaccination, ventilation, masks, testing, and avoid large indoor crowds. And it's important to keep that in mind. So whether we are looking at the first 5 weeks or until students are 5 through 11 are eligible for vaccination, or we're looking at the spread to go back to low or moderate, which we had low or moderate in Cuyahoga County until about 2 weeks ago. Those are things to keep in mind. I do think it's important that we keep in mind that we have some large indoor events coming up next week, locker setups and open houses. And I think it's important to think about mandating masks across the board for adults and students, because those are very crowded events. I'm sure you remember when you went through it with your students that it's, wall to wall, going through the hallways, whatnot. I think it would be a very wise decision before the school year starts that we start doing that. Just, at least announcing that for next week, because they do start next week.
My hope is with being able to put in a delay, not have this, is that with vaccine hopefully being approved by the FDA, that Governor DeWine will make it a mandate for students, just like maybe for measles and mumps.
What, you mean the vaccination?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about the mandate masks.
No, the vaccination. Again, the hope is that Governor DeWine will, just like measles, mumps, HPV, all of the vaccinations that students are required to have to come to school, with the exception of the very limited opt-out criteria, will do that. And I have to believe that he will probably go in that direction, considering what we went through, not just us, but the state went through, let alone the students in the last 2.5 years, from the point where we were all in school and then we were not in school. And I'm not the oldest one in here, but I'm sure no one could ever remember that happening before, where the schools were just shut down for weeks. And then slowly but surely opening back up. So I have to believe that Governor DeWine would be the right thing. My hope again is that that happens. Parents will adhere to that. And once you get that layer of protection, we'd probably be able to do it. Be a lot less stringent.
I'm not sure that would happen in the next couple of weeks when they have that.
Surprised how fast the governor wants to.
I'm certainly impacted by everyone that's here tonight and the calls and emails that we've received in the last several weeks. And I'm also impacted by the publicly traded corporations as well as the universities that you mentioned that are suggesting all masked. Why? Because they want to be more productive. We know that our teachers are more productive when we're all in and students are all in, and that seems like an important thing to do. One of the things mentioned tonight is that sometimes those there will be students that might be using an old mask that's worn over and over and over, but I know as a district, we're willing to provide those new masks and plenty of opportunities to wash hands, keep clean, and that type of thing. Something else that's come up, of course, is lunches. And will we provide opportunities for students, especially in the where the months where the weather is nicer outside, to say eat outside or to eat in gym space or open space to spread outside? Should that be a part of what we do as well?
I'd also add locker rooms. It's been brought up a number of times.
They shouldn't eat in locker rooms.
Well, right, they should not eat in the locker rooms, but changing of clothes for gym. And last year, I know we got away, did not do that, and it might be something we want to continue, particularly while we're doing masks and changing and everything else.
Any other discussion?
I guess just to remember that we will have, let's say that we do mandate masking. We're going to have those important opt-outs for various reasons, and we would want to listen to those opt-outs as well. And to potentially, as Mrs. Lozinski mentioned, some type of an application process might be something that we would want to engage in.
We had waivers last year for medical.
Yep.
Those were the mandated. I mean,
Correct.
that was part of law, so.
Correct. We're still gonna have to, no matter
We're
what,
still gonna have to have opt-out.
offer a waiver for those
Right.
medical.
We can dictate what requirements are.
But you gotta be careful with that.
It can be, religious, or it could be if someone has asthma, those types of things. You need to
Could be
allow.
socio-emotional.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that you need to allow.
I'm not saying that I would allow it, I'm just saying, just because Jimmy doesn't want to wear one, it sends a letter, Jimmy doesn't want to wear one. That's not, that goes back to being optional. So if it's a truly legitimate, religious, health, social reason, absolutely.
Correct.
Can we require the students that have been vaccinated to show proof of vaccination?
Not right now.
We
I don't
can't.
believe, I'd have to double check.
Believe it violates it.
And not, we gotta
It's not.
double check that.
You gotta check.
Yeah, I want to make sure.
Okay.
So if it came down to it that at the high school, if parents, if kids were vaccinated. Because I was looking through some of the other schools in the area and what they are doing now, and some of them mentioned that unvaccinated or vaccinated students would have, now that could change.
So if you think it's hard to manage a classroom of
Oh.
20 with a list, I would
Yeah.
think at Westlake High School with changing classes and students, the teacher would see 150 students per day. And I think that management, if we don't split that, is even deeper.
Which kind of goes back to if you mandated it, it's pretty simple for the teacher to be able to say, hey, Bob, there's your mask. Oh, yeah. Versus I'll have an opt-out. I can't remember.
Well, if nothing else, I can remember in my teaching days, the month of September and October were when the kids come back together and all the germs are melding together. A lot of teachers and students did get sick. So if nothing else, if we mandate the masks, will keep some of those other nasty colds and other germs maybe out of the way.
And again, as Mr. Pat said, this is unprecedented. We just haven't gone through it. It's a society, school district. So being extra cautious.
No.
Being extra cautious is maybe a prudent thing for us to consider.
Do we still have a stockpile of tests?
Yes.
What was the question?
Do we still have a stockpile of tests? COVID testing?
Any other discussion item?
Mr. Major is saying yes, because they're right by his office.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any other board comments?
So there's no other discussion. I need a
Want to vote on?
vote on that motion.
We're gonna take-
Okay, we need a,
So moved.
Oh, we already
did that.
I just need, if you'd like me to roll call.
Roll call?
yes, please do a roll call.
As a reminder, this is to a vote on the motion to table the resolution to approve the back to school plan for 2022 school year. Kraft,
Yes.
Fanukin,
Yes.
Lizinski,
Yes.
Here not,
Yes?
Stoll.
Yes.
The resolution is tabled.
That will automatically go on the next meeting agenda.
Well, yes.
Correct. Thank you. Okay, any other board comments? Hearing none. The next item, we will adjourn to executive session to discuss the appointment, employment, dismissal, discipline, promotion, demotion, or compensation of an employee or official. No action will be taken at this time. Is there a motion to adjourn to executive session?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, Mr. Hopkins?
To adjourn into executive session at 7:55 PM. Kraft,
Yes.
Fanukin,
Yes.
Lizinski,
Yes.
Here not,
Yes.
Stoll.
Yes.
Motion carries.